right, ladies and gentlemen, on the guest list today, we have one of my favorite songwriters in the world. He's been in the industry for 20 years, a bunch of different projects, and he has new music coming out now. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andrew McMahon to the podcast. Andrew, how are you, buddy?
Hello. How's everybody doing today?
We're great, man. I kind of miss the voice of God. I kind of miss the voice of God thing now, honestly.
I can always throw it on throughout the session if it makes you feel good.
Yeah, for anybody who we were off air and we were going, everybody had reverb on their vocals. So this is a true musicians podcast right here. We're all trying to add more sauce onto our vocals to see who can do the most.
I love it.
Andrew, but we can't thank you enough, man. It's funny. I was going back through because I love all the projects. I'm a diehard Jack's Mannequin guy. Everything in Transit is one of my favorite records ever. But I do have to, I have to say this. I think that La La Lie was my MySpace song for like an entire year.
I love that. The old days. Yeah, I love that song. I still like to play La La La. That's a good sing along at the end of the night.
Is there anything that you don't want to play anymore? Like anything off the old records, like the mixtape or like Dark Blue or something like that just drives you nuts?
No, I mean, Transit's one of my favorite records too. Like I'm hard pressed not to like playing those songs. I mean, I think there's some stuff like from deep into the something corporate catalog that like, you know, whether it's about not liking playing it, sometimes it's just like, I'm so far removed from some of that it's hard to totally connect. But I still like to, I mean, we went out recently and we were out with Carabas. It was like Dashboard and me on tour together. And it was kind of this like, oh, cool. Like this is an opportunity. These are the fans that are going to dig hearing something corporate tunes. So we busted out like Hurricane for the first time in a very long time. And, you know, she paints me blue and some of the like the deeper something corporate cuts too.
Does it feel like just kind of like a dated version of yourself, like the old emo like kind of days? Like I know Drake has a quote where he says he really doesn't listen to like So Far Gone and things like that because it just sounds like an old version of himself that he doesn't relate to today.
I mean, look, there are some songs and some recordings that I'll feel that way about, but something happens when you sort of revisit those tunes so many years removed that look, they end up sounding really great. I mean, the band that I'm playing with is awesome, and when we revive those tunes, they kind of take on a new life, and it feels, you know, strangely modern when you sort of filter it through the lens of just who you are and what you've grown into as a musician. And sometimes it's like very subtle, the nuances, but it adds up into kind of a fresh look at an old song.
I would be interested to see you do like a remake album of your current form with your current band and these old tunes and see. I've always thought about that. Even stuff that I wrote like 5 years ago, I'd love to go back and redo it now. Like, just have that second shot at a song I think could have been great, but I wasn't there musically yet.
Totally. No, I've actually had that thought many times. And as I get further into like being where I like the re-record rights for my music is no longer owned by my record companies anymore. There is like a temptation, not so much to remake what was already done, like not like the sort of Taylor Swift version of it or whatever, like try and recreate the tune, but do it in like a different way and maybe strip it back a little bit and get that modern take on the recording. I think it'd be really fun.
It's funny how much that record label, like that thought enters your head, because we've had similar thoughts about just doing completely different versions that we play every now and then, like at acoustic things before a show that sound really cool of our old albums. And then you start going through the process like, okay, if we do this, it means we're going to earn like 3% from it. It's going to go to the label. It's like, it kills the whole vibe, you know? Whereas if it wasn't that, you'd just be like, yeah, fuck it, we'll put it out.
Yeah, like if my label days ended on positive notes, I would have thought about it. But yeah, I've rarely exited a label with a smile on my face, other than the one that says, "Fuck, I don't have to be here anymore." You know. So
does anybody leave that a good way? There's never been like a shake hands parting of ways where it's like, "Hey, thank you for taking my money."
Yeah, I mean, I definitely still have relationships and friends that worked on my music over the years that I care for a great deal. But it becomes so impersonal. I mean, you guys all know it's like you sign a deal with like a team of people who love you and are excited about working for you, and within, you know, sometimes as little as a year, everybody's gone.
Yeah.
And you're stuck with people who may be also wonderful people, but they have the bands that they signed that they love, and so their attention's going to go there. So I I kind of approach it differently now and do kind of one-off deals with the teams of people who love me. And if they're still there after a record, then it's like, okay, cool, let's do it again. You know,
I learned that the hard way. My first deal ever, they signed us in 2015, and they didn't put the record out for 2 years because the head of the label just disappeared and moved to Alaska. So we didn't know what was going on.
It was that bad, Colin?
That's how bad the record was. She was like, dude, I got to get the fuck out of here.
Did you just not speak up? You never heard squeaky wheel gets the oil?
I don't know what, dude. I was like 23. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was like, is this how the record industry works?
Dude, we recently just put out instrumentals of our album Lunatic, and we had to do it through the label. And every now and then we have like a thought, like, did we fuck up by leaving the label? Like, we missed that money, miss all that. You know, we could have had like pushed it harder. They put out the wrong masters to Spotify on our instrumentals, and we're like, nope, it was the right decision. And it was one of the same, one of the same dudes that was there, like, surprisingly, when we were originally there, and was like, okay, good decision.
Yeah. Did he hit you with the whoops? He was just like, oh, my bad, dude. Let me fix that.
I actually felt bad for him because he was one of the good guys, and he knew that whoever had put the album up, like, fucked up. And he was like, no, not again. Just have to relive that all. It was fucked up, man.
Hey, I got a question real quick, going back to the playing some of the old stuff. Do you find, Andrew, that when, I don't know if you've had the same members playing behind you for a lot of years or whatnot, but as you have introduced new members in your band, when you do play those old songs, that it does breathe some sort of new creative life into them, not necessarily in a better or worse way, just in a different way, that I've got this guy on guitar now. And so just playing those parts with his tones kind of brings some sort of interesting element to it. Does that ring at all?
Totally. I mean, you know, what's funny is like, you know, Something Corporate, we were signed, I think I was 18 years old when we got signed, right? You know, and like, I think like hysterically we went through the, you know, and it was also like that right around that analog to digital sort of switch flip, you know, both in recording, and in technology, right? So like, I think my guitar players spent all of their like that gear budget, that first gear budget. Like, we got a piano and they bought like Line 6 pods and shit like that. You know what I mean? Like because it was like, oh, this is the cool new stuff, right? So I think for the first of the 3 or 4 years that we were on the road, we were just playing through such garbage technology because, like, you know, and then finally it was like by the end, you know, everybody was playing, you know, Marshalls and Fender Twins, and all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, we sound good. And then we like kind of broke up. And so, yeah, there was a, you know, a huge learning curve just being that young and being on tour and not having like a pro road crew initially, and having guys steer us in the right direction. That we got so much better by the end, but certainly like booting up into Jack's Mannequin. And even though we didn't play a ton of Something Corporate, I was really trying to kind of like put my foot down at that moment and say like, no, this is an entirely new project. We're going to do this, keep Something Corporate separate. But as we revisited those tunes, that was cool. And then finally, when I transitioned into this Wilderness project, it was like, cool, this is a stage where all of my music can live. You know, anything that I've written, like, I want to be able to show up on this stage. And then it got super fun, you know, not totally rearranging things, but, you know, like you said, just that, and just the thread of people, some of the guys in my bands who had listened to that music growing up or knew it, like kind of getting to sort of work it through their circuitry. And yeah, it was it's a ton of fun. I love doing it.
Do you feel like there's sorry, go ahead, Colin.
No, after you.
Do you feel like there's a psychological element to that time of also like letting go of any ups and downs emotionally you had associated with any previous projects and any negativity that might have been kind of lingering that you've gotten beyond?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm really fortunate that even though, like anything, I mean, when bands wind down, there's always a reason, right? You know, and certainly there's going to be some tension bound up in that somewhere. But I feel really fortunate that most of the time, I think when a project ended, it was less about people not getting along and more about just being in a new place in life and needing to find some fresh energy. But certainly going back to the songs, especially now, like, I mean, I turned 40 this summer, and, you know, just like on a lark, you know, I was playing I threw a 40th birthday bash for myself at the House of Blues at home here. And I asked the Something Corporate guys, I was like, dude, you guys just want to like hop on stage and do a set? We won't announce it, whatever. And And it was the first time, I think, even though we did like a reunion tour in like 2010, I'd say it was the first time since the band played together in the old days where it was like, it just felt amazing, right? It was like, it almost felt like it did when we were kids in the garage, because so much time had passed, and we all have these lives that we've built way outside of that music in those days, that getting on stage again was like, it was just like being surrounded by the best energy, and I felt like there was just so much love there and reverence for the fact that we created something that it was really nice.
It's so scary
That's
to me.
so awesome.
It's so scary to me that you're only 40 and you have 20 years of catalog and 3 different projects built up. Like, that's fucked up. I don't know if you realize how rare that is.
So, Andrew, I'm Dante, by the way. I'm the only person here that doesn't know you, but I want to take responsibility for having you here, because I actually found out about you the other way around. I didn't know about your older stuff. I heard this Wilderness album, specifically Stars. My mind was blown. Nice. I told Colin and Kenny, I go, dude, we got to get this Andrew McMahon guy on the podcast. And Colin was like, hey, dummy, this is the guy I've been telling you about for the past like 2 years. He's Jack's Mannequin guy. I was like, oh shit. He has been telling me about him this whole time. So then I went back and listened to your older stuff. I'm blown away. That Stars record is so good. I have to ask how that came about. What was the writing process like for that, and where did that come from? Because it's unbelievable.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's kind of like all these things, and I don't know how the rest of you guys write, but like, I'm sort of really fascinated by the mundane, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this exceptional thing. I think a lot of like the most important truth kind of comes out of the dumbest, simplest situations. And like, for me, with that song, like the genesis, the story of the tune, was really just like, I'd gone out for drinks and dinner with my wife and a few of our friends, and we got a little lit up and ended up in this bar that's kind of like a country western bar. It's really like a punk rock kind of dive, but it's fashioned as like a country bar, and they have country bands play, but it's a lot of like tough guys and sort of it's very much not me, but it's a place I'll find myself at the end of a long night, because that's just a vibe.
When I think tough guys, I think Andrew McMahon. It's my first thought.
Yeah. It's all muscle here, guys. But so, where I'm like happy to kind of hang out and be a wallflower in that situation. And on this night, there was a band, and my wife really wanted me to like go dance in front, like with this country band. And I was just like, I don't want to do that at all. Like, and it kind of turned into this thing where I think she just like, she was pissed. We had both been drinking, and she was just bummed out on me for like not like accepting the invitation. And eventually I did, but it was like, the night ended really bad. Like, I called an Uber, like just got in the back of somebody's car I thought was my Uber, but it was just a civilian, and they were like, thought they were getting carjacked. And now I'm like, all these people it was like, just one of those things when you're just a humiliating part of a relationship. And I woke up and I had that lyric, the stars that fell for you left holes in my roof, which I'd been hanging on to. And I ended up in this writing session with a guy named Sammy Whitty, who is super talented. I could look up his credits, but I think he did some work on like the Bon Iver stuff. And he's just like a really hip, but very sweet guy, also like kind of based down in Orange County where I am. And so we made that sort of like the scene of those background vocals and kind of started laying things down, and it sounded really cool. And I was like, okay, I think I've got a good story for this. And then, it's just me being an idiot in a bar fighting with my wife because I was too stupid to just like, go dance.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I do. This is the part of the conversation I'm really excited for, because as a songwriter, I've always looked up to you, because I think that you do turn the mundane into something eloquent, which is something that I always strive to do. But the thing that amazes me about you is, once again, as a fan of all 3 projects, I can pick an Andrew McMahon song out. Like, I don't know what it is. You have a very specific style of writing and a way that you form verses and choruses. And I don't know if this is true for you, but do you feel yourself like separating the 3, or do you just write songs and they happen to have fallen into where you were? Like, what's your writing process? Or did you have a line of demarcation where you're like, oh, this is how I write for The Wilderness, or this is how I write for Jack's Mannequin?
It's probably more the latter than the former, right? Like I don't, you know, even when I was like writing, say, some of the stuff that ended up on Everything in Transit, just as a for instance, a lot of that music was going to be for something corporate, right? You know, I had, you know, like we get in the rinse and repeat, you know, write the album, record the album, tour the album, start over. And we were about to do that again. And I think in the case of Jack's, like really what happened was we were kind of like all really burnt out. We'd been on the road like nonstop. It had been like 3 years where we'd put out, you know, a few projects and toured the whole time, you know, and we were just ready for a break. And so in that moment, I was like, well, I'm just going to go like demo like a couple of these songs. And I just went in with Jim, who produced the Something Corporate Records, and I think we recorded a couple things, but in the first sort of batch, Holiday from Real was like in that. And, you know, we didn't have a drummer, and we didn't have all these, you know, all the traditional inputs. So we just recorded everything ourselves. We were cutting up drum loops off of tape that we had that was just stored in the studio. And I think what I found in that moment, the biggest distinction between, you know, say the Jack's years and Something Corporate was like, it was just kind of fun to not have to sort of deal with the politics of opinions, you know, like, and just say like, well, I like this song. Like, what if we just do this? And you can just run down the track without anybody sort of in your ear going, I don't know if I like that, you know. And it's, you know, that's just the difference between being in a band and not. And there's benefits to both. But as far as the writing was concerned, especially between those two projects, I did it very much the same way, right? It was just that once I got a song from feeling finished into the studio, we built it in the speakers rather than in the rehearsal room, you know. And so that, I think, became the biggest, the way that those records really distinguish themselves. Because, you know, with Something Corporate, we would get in a rehearsal space and we would just grind it out until we felt like we could produce the track, you know, with the exception of like a song like The Astronaut, like that was cut in the studio. And there's a song called Watch the Sky, which was like kind of cut in the studio. But for the most part, all that was like rehearsal space. And then I think the biggest difference with The Wilderness, I think, has just been like, it's super collaborative, you know, like I'm way less afraid about getting in rooms where I barely have something created and just kind of holding on for dear life and seeing if we can make a song in that moment, you know. And I think I've found that that's what's kept it interesting for me, is like changing up my process, both in the writing and the production, and really being like, let's go meet a ton of people, have uncomfortable first dates, and try and write a song, you know. And that's been the biggest, I think, the biggest distinction between this project and my previous.
I'm curious, and I'm sure there's a gray area in there, but I'm sure you're writing music all the time, but are you one of the guys who's always writing music, and when it comes time for the record, you're combing through, or you write a record, you tour it, like you said, and then you take a year and a half off and then start the new record? You know, those two different.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. My goal, honestly, is to be doing all of it at the same time, right? Like playing shows, coming home, going in and doing a session. Like I'm much more geared these days, especially when I'm starting, like when I'm kind of doing the handoff between one record and another. I really enjoy kind of getting into rooms with other writers early on, just to see if it can, like, you know, just break something in me and in my creative process that points me in a new direction, rather than like just going back to the same well. And I'm kind of in that process right now. Like I finally finished this record that'll come out in March, and like I'm like, guys, let's get in some rooms. Like I want to get weird. Like let's, you know what I mean? It does take me finishing. Like if it's an album I'm making, I do have to finish it before I can start something new. That's the one big thing that I've noticed. Like if there's still like a song not finished and the artwork's not done and like whatever, it's impossible for me to think of the next thing. But I do tend to like write in fits, you know. I'll get home and I'll work for I'll book tons of sessions, or I'll sit at the piano a ton, and I'll kind of be frenetic about getting songs built up. And then sometimes I'll leave for tour and they'll just be sitting and I can revisit them and go, okay, this is what's good. And you have some perspective, you know?
Do you ever like a lot of us do? Are you ever in the back lounge of the bus with a little 21 key MIDI controller and a laptop?
Kenny, I've never seen you in the back of the bus doing music. You're playing video games. Stop pretending like you're working.
Shit, yeah. Well, yeah. So this is because we do have a lot of songwriters that listen to this, and I know Dante is very interested in the songwriting process, and this is just something that I've been working through the last couple of years. And being that you came up, you got signed at 18, and you're the front man of these bands, and obviously the songwriter too. And something that I've been letting go of is the idea of like, when I first got signed and I first started working, I had to be the songwriter. That had to be my identity. And I didn't want to work with other people because I felt like it took something away from me. And you're talking a lot about co-writing now and getting in rooms with people. Is that something that you grew into, or have you always been a co-writer?
Oh no, not at all. It was a really conscious effort to, I mean, it's kind of like when I say, you know, like the moniker, the In the Wilderness, for me, a lot of that was trying to dig myself out of being attached to a process and saying the way you're going to continue to make new music that feels fresh, you know, for me, like, and I need that, like, I need things to feel fresh. Like, it's just, I think that's why, you know, all the name changes and the different land, like sonic palettes I like to play in. It's like, that's how it works for me. And so, no, I think it was around, I mean, I had started doing a little on the last Jack's Mannequin record. Like, I wrote with Matt Thiessen from Reliant K on a couple songs. We did a song called Amy Eye and another song called People Running, which were really cool Jack's Mannequin songs. And I loved it. Like, we had so much fun. And then I wrote with the Academy Is for one of their records. So I started doing some things like that. I wrote with Mark for OAR and wrote a couple songs for those guys.
That's our best friend, dude. We love Mark.
I love Mark. He's the greatest. And I love all those guys. So it was in this moment around 2012, 13 in there that I started doing a little more of it. And then when I kind of shut everything down with Jack's Mannequin, and I was like, I'm not going to work on my own music for a minute. And I ended up working on like a TV show for NBC, and then I was like, I was ready to get into it, and so I called my publisher at the time, and I was like, all right, dude, like, I kind of need to get like the fucking paddles out, like, you know, I just need to shock my system with like the weirdest rooms you can put me in. And so he put me in a room with Fernando Gariby and Ali Tamposi. Fernando like did a bunch of Lady Gaga records and Kylie Minogue. He was like a badass sort of DJ dance producer. And Ali had written What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger for Kelly Clarkson, right? And I almost left on the first day. I mean, I was in there just terrified and feeling so small. And I remember like I went out and I was like, I started chain smoking like cigarettes because I was like freaking out. I was like, what do I do? I'm like, somebody had a cigarette. I was like, I'm just going to go like smoke, you know, like, and I was out there just freaking out, and Allie cornered me, and I was like, I don't think I'm adding anything for you guys. Like, I feel really insecure. And she's like, you're here for a reason. And she gave me this crazy pep talk. She's like, you have something that we need here. You like write this kind of a lyric. You do it, you know, like really like pump me up. And that was it for me. And from then on, I began really being fascinated with the idea of surrounding myself with hyper creative people who have different perspectives and seeing what happens when it, you know, like when it works, it can be really special.
I love that. It's such a good exercise. I tell all the artists I work with to write with as many, just write with everybody, every single person. You'll never need, if you get a bridge, if you get a lyric, if you get a beat, if you get a pattern, like whatever it is, you just take these little things and it kind of builds into what your record becomes. I think it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's one thing when you're like when you're just starting to write and everything is new and you're like learning your way around your instrument and you're channeling your influences for the very first time. It's like it seems a little less essential, right? But as I think as we all get older, we create patterns, right? And I think I think patterns can be dangerous for creativity if you don't insert new stimulus into the pattern so that it can take you in new directions, right? That's what this is for me.
I used to for years. I'd have my samples folder and like, oh, I need some kicks, same kick clap, same all that stuff. And then finally one year I was like, every time I use something, it gets deleted off the hard drive and never used again.
Hell yeah.
And you got to find new stuff. Yeah.
You should probably go back to the old ones.
Even with like certain plugins, like you brought up Little Altar Boy or like Valhalla Delay. They're great and all that, but it's like I can't use them anymore because I'd start doing the same things. I put the same plugins, which I know is not as critical a part of the songwriting process, but it does start to shape things when you can quickly get a certain sound. So it's great sometimes just be like, no plugins today. I'm not allowed to use them or whatever.
With soft synths. I'm always looking for new, like, I just need new sounds. I never want to use these ones ever again. I'm bored,
Oh my God. Well, Andrew, I mean, we're talking about a new Jack's Mannequin or a new Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness record. That's why you're here. And I still remember the first time I heard Cecilia in the Satellite on the radio. I had been on the Philly alt station, just like changing channels, and I heard this hook, and I was like, "This sounds like Andrew McMahon. Like, what? This sounds like Jack's Mannequin. What is this?" And then they said at the end, "This is new Andrew McMahon." And I've been so interested to watch from like, I mean, High Dive was like, I put that on loop for months and just tried to emulate the way that you wrote songs. But I think my question is kind of like starting that new project. Was there a certain song on that first record that you did and you're like, okay, this is a new project?
That's tough. I mean, High Dive is definitely pretty. I think it would arguably be the sort of turning point in a sense. I mean, I knew I was making a new project. I had. I had signed with new management. I'd already done the EP, the Pop Underground EP, which was like kind of the like, let's just get super weird. I'm going to work with this like basically a dude who's doing like dance and like hip hop music and like see what we can make together, which was super cool. But it was sort of like the first step in a direction. And then when I signed with Crush a bunch of years ago, Jonathan was like, cool, like you just need to not tour until you have a record. That's it. Like I don't want you to tour until there's the music's there, which nobody had ever really empowered me that way. I think most managers are like, oh, this kid can make me a fortune on the road. Get to work, boy. And so I moved into Topanga Canyon. I would like live there for 3 or 4 days a week. And then I come home. I was married, so my wife was like, yeah, you can't go the whole time. But I would go and I lived in this weird little cabin and in the middle of nowhere where you didn't see anybody if you stayed there for days. And the song Rainy Girl was sort of the first on that record was the first one that got me out of the canyon. It was like I had written tons and tons of stuff that I was excited about, but then I was like, this one feels like something, right? And that's when I got in touch with Mike Viola, who was one of the producers on the record, and said, I kind of have this thing, would you be down to like help me out with it? And so we did Rainy Girl, and we had so much fun, and I loved him, and I loved his like home studio, and his family was there, and I was about to have a kid, so I was kind of like, oh, this is cool, like you can be a musician and a dad and like still like be cool, and then we got to High Dive. I think it was pretty much the next thing we did, and it was like I had this little Casio keyboard, right? Yep. And Mike just like programmed this loop that is still underneath the whole song, and the whole mission was like we listened to Boys of Summer like maybe 10 times, and we were like, what if we try and just rewrite Boys of Summer, like without ripping it off, but like if there's like a color line here, if there's a if the change moves this way or it goes major minor, we basically tried our best to just like pull the song apart and understand what made it good, and then just tried to apply all the things we learned in that moment to this song, And so we would we kind of make 2 or 3 steps forward. The first day we got like a good amount of the verse stuff done, but the chorus wasn't there. And then we just kept on going back to Boys of Summer and being like, okay, like this is where we fucked up. Like go back, like change that, and it was so fun. You know what I mean? Again, it's like kind of just speaks to this idea of like, it was just fun. It was like being like a kid in your, you know, in your friend's like basement playing with like toys and like toy cars and shit. You know, you're just like goofy and like laughing when it sounds good and feels good. But I would say it was High Dive was like the first thing that came out of it. It was just this Casio drum machine demo that we ended up building up. But that were me and management. And everybody was like, oh, this is cool. We could do a whole record with like no guitars and like all sort of pianos and synths and like, and try and make it like make big pop songs, you know?
Wow. Did you have a new process for the new record? Like, was there anything that like, once again, you're always shedding skin and trying something new. Like, was the new record anything different?
Totally. Well, you know, it's like I don't know if you guys know Tommy English, but Tommy's
like, a buddy.
Yeah. So
he's
Tommy,
an incredible writer.
He's and he's just, so Tommy kind of bailed me out at the end of the second Wilderness record. Like I had been in New York for so long and I just was like kind of making a mess of my life, just staying out way too late and just partying too hard. And it just got to like a kind of a dark place. And I was like, I got to come home. I can't live in New York City. I thought I could. and I had to finish the record and I didn't want to go back to New York. So we got a hold of Tommy, and Tommy did the last two songs on the Zombies record for me. And I just loved it so much. I had so much fun in his studio. He was he was so confident and so good that at a time when I was like really like not in the best like spiritual headspace, I just wasn't like at my healthiest. And I could show up into his studio and he'd be like, how about this? And I would just be sitting in front of the speakers like, oh fuck, man, thank you so much. That I didn't have to grind on this for days to get to it, you know. And so I asked if he would come on board and do this record with me. And I'd had a lot of songs written going into it. So it was a little different in that sense that usually in at least the last couple records, or I say the first two Wilderness records, it was like being written as it was being produced, you know. And there was a little bit of that going on with this one, but I had, you know, a few years of songs between, you know, before the pandemic started. I was like kind of in like a pretty prolific mode and super excited about making a new record like right away. And then the pandemic hit and I was like, and I just shifted gears and I wrote a memoir and kind of went away from the piano. So when I came back, it was like, oh, there are all these songs and now they have new meaning kind of. And the ones that I really like have survived this test of time, you know, and I brought them to Tommy and we just kind of started chipping away at them and then also kind of writing in the studio while it was happening. And, so it was a little more of a formal process than I'd been in since leaving Jack's Mannequin, where we would kind of go in and make the record. I've been much more piecemeal over the years, and this one was kind of more like, hey, we have a bunch of songs, we'll write more as we go, but like we kind of cut the whole record in 2 or 3 months for the most part.
Wow, Jesus. Well, when can we expect the record?
March, like I think it's like the middle of March. Yeah. So there's going to be, I mean, I have no idea when this is going to come out, but there will probably be 2 or 3 more tunes that'll come out ahead of it. Like the new format of having to game the algorithm or something. Which is fine. I'm like, what else is new? I think that's the business in general.
It's all a fucking game. We know that.
It always has been, But yeah, the full length will come out at the middle to end of March, and I mean I think there's a ton of really cool music on it. I'm too close to it now. It's hard for me to like, to really know, but I'm cautiously optimistic that this one's going to land in a good place.
Are you bringing back the wacky inflatable flailing arm tube men for this next run?
I kind of had to retire those guys, and then it kind of got to the point where it started like I so many people started doing it that it was like, okay, now this this gag has now entered the zeitgeist, you know.
I could tell you, I played in AWOL Nation for a lot of years, and we played a bunch of shows together. And I remember like some festivals, like you, us, Weezer, Panic, whatever. And it was the first time I had seen the Wacky Inflatable Guys, and everybody's like, "What an idea! It's incredible."
Do you want to hear something funny about that? So I work with this. I've worked with this amazing guy named John Morris, and he kind of like has like an artist consortium, and they work on tons of projects. But for a long time, he was helping me build and design our sets and our gags and all that stuff. And so he had pitched the idea of the inflatable tube men, and we were about to leave for tour, I think, with like maybe with Weezer and Panic, and I don't know, maybe 2015. And like I had him we had him custom done so that the backdrop and our clothes and the inflatables all matched, you know, like, and we're just like, this is gonna blow people's minds. And then we play Coachella that year, and we're all like, I mean, I won't even get into like the state of mind we were all in at the moment, but we were feeling very good, and we were watching Sufjan Stevens, and it was like just this. I mean, the night had been incredible. The music was so good, and he was unbelievable. And it gets to the end, and they play. What's the No Cars Go? No, is that Chicago? Is that the name of that song?
Yeah.
Beautiful song. It gets to the end of it, and I swear to God, inflatables come up, right? And we were like weeks away from debuting this thing, and here's dude, and I at first almost started crying, right? And my band just like saw me, but like everybody just like huge hug. John, who had designed the gag for us, was there, and we just like held each other like, this is good. It means we should be doing this. It's okay.
This is good. That's so cool.
Well, you know, if you need a new gag for tour, I'm here to volunteer Kenny to come on stage every night and do a Game of Thrones naked walk of shame on stage. Would that be all right for you?
I mean,
yeah.
That sounds perfect, actually. Yeah.
Hey, the bass player from Imagine Dragons used to walk naked across the AWOL stage every single show. So.
Really?
True. I mean, in his underwear, but yeah.
Naked enough.
And he would walk so slowly, and Aaron would be doing his thing, and he would just be like standing there walking so slowly. It was so awkward.
I have such an admiration for anybody who is willing to like wear like very little clothes in front of lots of people. Like I don't want anybody ever to see me with my shirt off. It's just like you know, and I know guys are just like, oh dude, like let's roll, like skinny. I'm like, forget that. No, it's not me. So good on him. I admire his confidence.
Well, Andrew McMahon, this has been an absolute pleasure, man. We'll be sure to plug the new album when it comes out. We'll see you on tour. Anything else for us, brother?
No, man, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate the chat. It's good to get to hang with some like-minded
Andrew,
folks.
the last thing I'll say is that you know that this industry is very small and everybody knows everybody, and every single person that I talk to about you has the same vibe, that you're just the industry sweetheart, and everybody loves you and thinks that you're absolutely incredible. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I've been really fortunate to get to do it for a long time. So you try to not don't want to piss off the wrong people. Some people deserve to get pissed off, but those people generally aren't hanging around for too long either. So.
Oh my God. Well, Andrew McMahon, thank you so much, man. We'll see you soon. All right.
Cheers, you guys. Be well.